so that so that you have the opportunity to look back at what I've shared today. You'll also receive a PowerPoint presentation of this, as well as some other supporting materials to help you remind you of everything we talked about today as well. That will come out after we finish up today. Okay, any questions before we get started? Nope, okay. And since it's only two of you, I will stop, for verbal questions periodically just to make sure you're on target. So first thing out of the gate that I always, not always, but it seems in the last 2 semesters, or actually I should say 3 semesters now, had to talk about how COVID is affecting. I was really hoping at this point, I think we all were, that we'd have less of COVID impacting our lives and the things that we can do. But it's going to continue to impact, we know, for at least another 9 months or so. At our individual level, and maybe a macro level much larger in terms of economics and things as well. So, but in terms of field, what has that meant? For some students, that has meant that it continues to restrict the types of placements and the amount of placements available going into 2022. So presenting this to you in awareness that there are absolutely sites for you, like I said, but there may not be as many as we are always hope for. And we always try to get ones that are in your interest area, at least a couple. So you both would have a minimum of 3, I believe. I don't think either one of you here this afternoon would have less than 3 options. So there should be 3 or more places for you that are available in your interest area and that you can interview with. Sometimes those sites, though, have had certain requirements that they have presented to us. So some sites have said they want everyone to be vaccinated that would intern, or it may have other requirements. If that is the case, if we know in advance that they have some additional requirements other than the standard perhaps mask or social distancing, we're going to add that to the profile for each site that I will show you in a little bit. So each site has a profile with their information on it. That additional information regarding COVID would be on there. When COVID's kind of reared back in March of 2019 or 20, excuse me, years are flowing together too quickly now. That we wrote policies quickly. We kept everyone in field. The only time someone was displaced, which had happened twice, was because the agency was no longer able to keep the intern on site. We never stopped placement, so I don't foresee that will be an issue for the 2 of you as well. If for some reason a site does say, there's an outbreak, everybody has to go home for 2 weeks, we work around that. Those hours can be made up over time. We can give you a few alternative assignments to make up some hours that you'll need to do and things like that. So we do have processes and policies in place to support you through this pandemic. Any questions on that? Okay. All right, so generalist practice. The 2 of you are right now doing what we call generalist coursework, which means that you're doing introductory social work coursework. It's also considered the foundation of social work. So in that year, you're learning about macro practice, right? Micro practice, meso practice, how that all interacts with social work. You'll learn more, obviously, as this semester goes on. And as this 2 semesters in front of you, spring and summer, certainly you'll learn more. And that's the practicum that you'll be doing. So the practicum, the first practicum is this generalist practicum. And you're really then at that level focusing on introductory social work, assisting clients within the context of human behavior and the social environment, and incorporating strengths-based perspective, empowerment theory. So these are really foundation level social work principles and theories that we're learning about right now in your year of first year of placement and coursework in the program. How does social policy research and biopsychosocial spiritual assessment impact, and how do you utilize those types of assessments to best help your clients or students or whomever your individuals will be that you'll serve with? Assessments and interviews to inform practice. You will do some of that. And advocate for human rights and social, economic, and racial justice. This has become more of, we're adding more language regarding racial justice as well to our competencies and training. Obviously, it's always been a part of our social work, I shouldn't say not always, a part of our social history as social workers to always be fighting for racial injustice, but more and more, and we're building it more into the explicit curriculum, as well as into the competencies for practice as well. This is considered a non-clinical placement. So I put that in big bold letters because sometimes there's confusion about, I'm in a clinical program. Can I be doing clinical work? You will be able to do that in your clinical placement because right now you haven't studied any clinical social work. You won't be studying clinical social work until you successfully complete your first placement. So for you to practice within the realm of clinical social work, even as a student, would be outside of the ethical and knowledge base of you at your student level. So any questions about that at all? So obviously you are in a clinical concentration program, but you really aren't going to start that coursework until you complete this. So we don't want you practicing outside of that training level in this place. Okay. So, but when that clinical practice comes, you'll have another orientation similar to this. So I'll spend more time talking about what clinical practice is then. But for you to have a framework, it is grounded in fundamental social work practice. So everything that you're learning right now is basically the building blocks to clinical practice. We build off of our foundation year. So you are learning, sometimes you're learning the most important pieces of social work. And then the clinical concentration is just more of a focused area of social work that you'll be able to do after you finish your first placement. You'll start that coursework and then do your clinical placement before you graduate. All right, so what is field? What does it look like? It is an opportunity to practice the theory, the knowledge that you're gaining from the classroom, right? If you've done any type of internship, that's really what this is. In social work, however, it's highly regulated by the Council on Social Work Education. So probably more than any other, or maybe medicine, we're close in terms of regulation. We have a lot of policy and procedure attached to how we do field, what you can do in field, who can be your supervisor, how many hours. And so that's what we're going to dig into a little bit today so that you understand those pieces well. Under the instruction and supervision of professionally trained Master of Social Work supervisors and program approved field instructors and liaisons. So those are faculty that I'll talk about in a few minutes, a little bit about whose roles and responsibilities. You as traditional students will spend 1,000 hours in field, 400 in the first placement and 600 in this clinical placement. You cannot do your placement, both placements in the same agency unless it is absolutely necessary, and I approve that. So a couple times during the real height of COVID, I had to do that because there just wasn't anything else available to a student. Or if they're in such a rural area where there just wasn't other options. But typically I would know that in advance and I would pre-approve that. So just being mindful of that. Oftentimes students, I have students, which is great, agency love them so much. They're like, can't you stay and do your clinical placement too? No, I would love to. Maybe I can come back and work here someday. So, which is nice. It's nice to hear that people want to hire our students in that first placement or have them come back for clinical. But it's really to your benefit to be in a different agency, experiencing something very different potentially. So every student also is expected to participate in the field seminar for 1 hour bi-weekly, so every other week. There is a live virtual, of course, seminar that is led by our faculty. There is a seminar portion to your field placement. So you have your actual hours on site, and then you have seminar where you actually turn in assignments as well. So that course meets live every other week. And the reason that is there's a lot of research about field is that it can feel isolating and overwhelming. It's really a nice benefit to you if you aren't able to attend live to get the support of your instructor and her or his or their training, their knowledge and their ability to help you integrate what you're learning in the classroom with what you're doing in field. They kind of help you with that critical thinking and to develop that skill set. If you do attend live, it is an hour that you can count toward your total. So there's an advantage there too. So you can count that toward your total hours. It is not held against you if you can attend, but I do feel like it's not as supportive to your education. And I do think that students who attend definitely feel like they get a lot better experience during field, to be there with their peers and with the instructor. So again, it's expected for you to attend. It is held in the evening. It's a small group held together. It would be the smallest class you would have, up to 10 students in the class. And it is held when the majority or all students in the class can attend. So we do a Google poll, and we actually poll when is the best time for the students to attend in that section. I also actually separate the students out by time zones and agencies and things like that, so that hopefully it'll be more convenient for you as well. Okay, the NASW Code of Ethics, the two of you, depending on when you start in the program, you've definitely already started to hear about it, or you've already got more into it. It is going to be in every single course, and then you have an entire course that's dedicated to ethics. Exclusively, I should say. The NASW Code of Ethics does guide all things from the moment you decide to be a social work student until you no longer practice as a social worker. And for most of us, that's lifelong, right? That's a profession, not a career. So it's a standard we live by when we use the NASW Code of Ethics. So making sure that you think about the Code of Ethics at all times as you enter into your practicum, at your practicum. Again, you may be more and less familiar with it, but we're going to continue to refer you back to that as a way to guide your thinking and the way to handle yourself in different settings or in areas of ethical dilemma. So again, the generalist field placement, it puts emphasis on developing the competence of the professional generalist social worker or the foundation social worker. It requires minimum, again, of 400 hours. 200 hours in the spring, 200 in the summer for you both. And that breaks down to about 13 to 15 hours per week. When I said the minimum 13 will get you the minimum 400, that's true. So I just love students to do a little flexing if they wish in terms of week to week. But we really don't want you to go under 13, because a lot of times when you're under 13 for a week, you start to kind of disengage from the clients that you're going to continue, start to see and have relationships with. More than 15, we find that students are often, especially in the first semester, overwhelmed because you're learning so much and it can be pretty intense. So at 15 hours and going to school, and then all of you being non-traditional students who are trying to have multiple things going on, we find that students who go over that 15 really, unless they have really hardly any other commitments, really don't do well. So we really want to encourage self-care and not burnout. And you do the same placement. So your generalist placement is going to be at one location for 2 semesters. You don't have to worry about changing sites during that 2-semester experience. You're making a 2-semester commitment to that agency for the 400 hours. Okay. All right. Any questions again so far?
Yeah, I had a couple questions.
Sure, Aaron.
With the field placement meetings, will they actually be Zoom meetings like we're doing now?
For the seminar?
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
And how many of those, do we know the amount of those that we have to attend? You're saying it's not mandatory though,
It's
right?
not mandatory, right? We can't expect it. It is part of our mission as an online program that in a requirement. We can't require you to be there. We can't hold it against you. Just highly encourage it. So there will be 9 per semester held.
9
1 hour each. Yep. And they're usually, like I said, sometime maybe around 7:30 in the evening. If it's, if you work second shift, you can just let them know, like, yeah, that's you. So you can, it may be that, you say, I'm better at 12 noon. And, if there's a group of students who maybe, if most of them are interested in that time frame, it would work. But yeah, whenever you can attend. Again, it's just to your benefit to attend, not an expectation.
And will there be like an email or list provided to us with specific dates and times?
Yes, yep, that'll all be part of the, so that would all come out to you in December. So Your placement's going to start in early January, but your field instructor will reach out to you in mid-December and say to all of you in that section, which again, there's usually not more than 10 in a section, they would say, you know, for you, Erin, these are the times that best meet my time as the instructor. Please let me know which times work best for you. I can tell you it meets every other week. So even right now, I could tell you that week 1 is the first week in January. That would be the first seminar. Then it would be every other week after that, a set time. So I don't know the time it might meet, but I do know what weeks. So it would be like week 1 of the semester, week 3, week 5. So it means on the odd weeks. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. And again, the clinical placement, it's going to build off of that. It's going to be additional 600 hours. And just to kind of think ahead to that, that's going to be about 18 to 23 hours a week when you get to that. So depending on if you're part-time or full-time, that's probably going to come, if it's full-time, you are going to come right after your part-time placement or after your generalist placement. You're going to go right into your clinical placement. If you're part-time, you'll stop for some coursework in between and then do your clinical placement before you graduate. Okay, so what are the roles and responsibilities of the student in field? This is one way to think about it. The competencies of field education for social work students. Again, Council on Social Work Education oversees and regulates all of this. So they set the 9 learning competencies for field, and that's what's listed here. Your responsibilities as a student are to engage in these activities, and they are written out with particular tasks and activities that you will do during the semester in your field placement. They don't have to worry about it right now, because that will be written out at the beginning of the placement start, so in January. So, but for you to know what you're going to focus on, thinking about that, these are the things that you will focus on during both your generalist placement and your clinical placement. The competencies are the same, it's just the tasks are going to be different because of the difference in the level of training that you're doing. So the competency areas here, these 9 related to ethical and professional behavior, engaging in diversity and difference, advancing human rights, engaging in research, policy, and engaging, assessing, intervening, and evaluating the populations and practice that you do. And again, each one of these 9 competencies will have 2 tasks that are going to be specific to you, individualized to your specific needs and to that agency. So for example, if you're brand new to social services at all, and you've only done coursework, ethical and professional behavior might look different to you than somebody who has been in the social service realm for 10 or 15 years, knows some sense of the ethics and professional of social work. And so their skill might be a little more advanced in that. So each plan is going to look individualized. Okay. But the competencies of 9 of you, so both of you, and you might be in class together, the 2 of you. So you would be focused on the same competencies because you're in the same training level, but you might have very different tasks depending on what that agency's goals are and mission and vision, as well as your particular learning needs. Okay. Some roles, important roles and responsibilities to familiarize yourself with are people that are going to be very much engaged with your field placement. The first person that is really important, besides you, obviously, is going to be your MSW field supervisor. And this is an individual who has at least a master's degree in social work and at least 2 years of postmaster's experience. They're going to take on the responsibility of meeting with you formally 1 hour per week, 1-to-1, maybe 2-to-1, depending if there's an extra student at your agency. And they also may be the day-to-day trainer for you. And that means they're going to be responsible for your learning in the field placement, reinforcing your student identification with the purpose, values, and ethics of the profession. They're going to be in charge of creating that learning plan with you at the beginning of the semester and making sure that your time at the practicum is focused on social work and that your time is best utilized in learning social work. The individual MSW field supervisor may be employed by or connected to your agency, Or if that agency doesn't have an MSW supervisor, there may be one off-site that's going to meet with you virtually. Or if it's just in another department, of course, it could be across the hall. But if it's not in the agency, it's most likely you're going to meet with that person virtually 1 hour per week for formal supervision. In the situations, we don't leave you astray the other hours if you don't have an MSW supervisor all the time. What happens in situations where there's not an MSW supervisor to train you day to day and only to meet with you 1 hour per week, we assign you what's called a task supervisor. And a task supervisor is someone who does work for the agency, has a master's degree in potentially social work, but most likely it's in a degree similar to social work. So it could be someone with a master's in human services or public health, psychology. What else have I approved? Similar degrees, people who have worked in similar areas, human services. I don't know if I said that one yet, but master's degrees that are similar to introductory social work experience. So that person might be your day-to-day trainer. They're going to guide your task. They're going to make sure that you're focused on the activities of the agency. And then the MSW supervisor would work closely with that task supervisor and you to make sure that your learning goals are being met. So there might be 3 people working with you within the agency setting to ensure that your learning plan and goals are being met. That sometimes can be a little tricky. So any questions on those, like any questions regarding the differences, who's who, anything like that? Right. Again, this is all shared with you in written form. We also send you the recording. It's also in the field manual, which you'll be required to read as part of some of your pre-field process as well. So there's lots of places you can reference if you get confused on these roles and responsibilities as well. A faculty field liaison. So this is another person that's very involved with your placement, but they are not directly engaged with the agency. They are a member of our faculty who is a liaison. And if you've heard that term before, it means the same thing. They basically facilitate between 2 different entities. So our faculty field liaison is someone who's going to facilitate communication between the university and your need for learning on the university side with your agency supervisor or supervisors. So, you know, it's going to help you, it helps support you, and it also encourages good communication. And those individuals work directly, report directly to me. So if your field liaison has questions or concerns that they're not feeling comfortable managing with you or your agency, they will then consult with me as well. So, and then I have the director of ability to kind of intervene if policy and procedure may not be followed, or there's concern of ethical follow through or things like that as well. So the field liaison also has a master's degree in social work, at least 2 years experience. They may also have a DSW or a PhD, depending on who we've hired in that role. The faculty liaison, most of the time, at least 95% of the time, that's going to be the same person that teaches your seminar class, which is kind of nice because they're going to then be reviewing also reflections that you turn in about your field placement. They're going to be reviewing your timesheets, and they're going to know about how you're doing not only in seminar, but also in the placement as well. Okay, and before I get into kind of the step-by-step procedures, any questions up to this point? Okay, all right. So, whoops, jumped ahead. So as part of what we call the pre-field process, there's several steps that we go through, that we walk you through as part of the field portion of your education. The first piece was when we had that pre-field call, that we would have had a conversation for about 30 minutes, and we talked about your logistics of field and your interest area. So those were completed. Today is your orientation, and it is required for you to attend a field orientation before the start of each placement. You are attending the longer version. When you enter your second placement, it's a more abbreviated version. It's about an hour long. After orientation today, you'll be on to step 3, and you'll be able to, you'll have some pre-field assignments to complete in a software program that we use called Tavera. Tavera is going to be something you're going to get very familiar with by the time you graduate. It's going to where you house all of your documents regarding field, from the point of pre-field assignments that you will have, to timesheets, to your learning plan that have those competencies in it that we talked about, those 9 competencies. It's going to house assessments that of you, you know, have all of your hours, and then you have you'll have full access to that for your entire life. So this is a lifelong access to this program, so that if down the road an agency or a licensing board wants any information regarding you, you'll, have a place that's basically a portfolio, an online portfolio that houses all of that information for you, so that you know that it's there and you can pull it out if there's ever a question regarding hours or anything like that you completed during your field placements. You'll also have the handbook, the field manual for you to review, some FAQs that we'll send to you about field and that walkthrough process. I have a little overview video that I ask that you to watch, and then there's some walkthrough slides of how to use Tavera as well that we'll be sending your way for you to review. After your orientation today, you will also be registering in Tavera. You'll actually receive an invitation that will go out to you after attendance today. And this will allow you to start that documentation process of your pre-field assignments. So you'll go in there, you've already been entered into a class that will have what we call the pre-field application or assignment process. So there are 10 pre-field assignments already prompted in there. So as soon as you go into Tavera, you follow that invite into Tavera, it's going to take you to those 10 pre-field assignments. And you want to complete those by no later than September 30th. So you have until the time you enter today, until the 30th to complete the 10 pre-filled assignments. That might feel overwhelming, but the most of them are just very simple little review forms, like 1-page forms to review. Like one is a confidentiality form that you attest you'll maintain confidentiality while in your field placement. A second one is a 1-page self-assessment of yourself. So most of them are going to be like a 5-10 minute assignment. Some of them might be like 45-minute videos to watch. And then a couple of them are just obtaining something. So one is to obtain a background check, one is to obtain insurance. I'm actually going to get into each one of these in more detail in a few minutes. So if you're wondering if I'm pushing or rushing through, I'm actually going to go through each one in a minute. But by September 30th, you would want to have all 10 of them done. You must have all 10 of them done before you're able to contact any site that's available to you. So it really is to your benefit to get them done as quickly as possible, because you can actually start your contact and interview period next week on the 15th, if you so choose, and your pre-field assignments are done. You have, though, until October 31st to contact and interview with sites, but you should be completely done with all interviews by October 31st. Please don't contact any sites outside of these dates of September 15 to October 31. All right. Again, I'm going to go through a little bit more of these assignments and things down here, but any questions on sort of these procedures at all? Okay. The last few steps are after you're done with your interview process, you're going to come back to Tavera, enter the information in regarding who you interviewed with, and you're going to rank who you interviewed with in terms of your choices. So I'm going to stop for a second, just explain to you how our process goes. So when you go out to interview with a site, little different than like for a job interview, if someone just offers you something, you can certainly just take it. In our process, and this is something a lot of universities across the country do, is have you go out and do the interview, and then you actually will just mark who your top choices are. So if you interview with 3 sites and you rank them from 1 to 3, that's what you're going to turn into me. So you're not going to necessarily just take an offer on the spot if someone did offer you something. And that's because we try to have the reason for a match process versus more of just an interview and acceptance process is it does allow all students who go out at the same time an opportunity for equitable access to all agencies, and for agencies who may not be as desirable as others. They're all vetted and are great sites, but some folks, you know, if there's a lot of people who are interested in one area and they want that site or they've heard great things about that agency, everybody's going to go to that agency for interviews. So, you know, we tell you do at least 3 interviews and rank what your top choices are. So then what happens is they then turn in their agency ranks of students. So, you know, for the 2 of you, if Erin, you were ranked 1 and Jocelyn number 2 as from the agency, and then you rank the same. Erin, you said that agency who ranked me number 1, I happen to be, that's my number 1. You will automatically be ranked with that agency. You'll be matched with that agency. Okay. So I actually then, I do sort of the side-by-side comparison. I take that agency form and I take that student's form that's submitted into Tavera, and I'm going to look at them and I'm going to match up best rank side to side. Who's matching the best? So you're not going to be matched with a site that you didn't interview with. You won't be matched with a site that you don't have any interest in. It would be just, you might not get your first or second choice, you might get your third. Agency placement would then be confirmed and announced by me by no later than November 7th. So remember, the interview and submission of the choice form, that interview form, would be done by October 31. So by no later than November 7th, and it probably will be actually a few days earlier than that, I would announce in Tavera and by email where you've been matched and who your contact person is for that site. Then you will continue that process in Tavera. Once you get going in Tavera, it's going to be the place for you to document most things, again, related to field. You're going to confirm your placement, the supervisors, and the start date. And all of that information is going to be housed again in Tavera, and it should be done by no later than November 30th. So part of the things that you'll have to do here is like sending a document through Tavera to your field supervisor to complete. They attest that they are have those credentials that they're listing. So they'll say, yes, I have my MSW from University of Maryland from 1997. So it shows me they have the experience, the training, and they're attesting to wanting to take you on as a student. So those things are then, all of that's housed in Tavera and is electronically signed and things like that. Okay. I will stop one more time just to see any questions there. Okay, good deal. Okay, so oops, I kind of skipped over, but this is the schedule that you'll be, for your next 2 semesters for field. For January through August of 22, this is going to be your schedule. Another way, if you forget this slide or misplace this slide, it's not a huge deal. What field does is we follow the School of Graduate and Professional Program school calendar. So you can access it anytime. If you have any question about when am I supposed to be on a break, when am I supposed to be in field, when am I not supposed to be in field, we follow this, so you can remember. Let's say it's right, I follow the SGPP calendar. So when is the end of the first semester? When is there a break? Things like that. So spring semester starts January 3rd. It ends April 24th. There's a break between the spring and summer semester. You should not be in field during that time. The university is closed. The reason we have you do that is for 2 reasons. We want you to practice good self-care. It's like your vacation. We want you to take a break, be away from your courses, be away from your field placement. It's also a concern for liability. If something happens to you during that time and we're not as accessible, we worry that you might be liable or get involved in something. We won't be as accessible to you during that time. So it's just best for everybody that you're able to take that break. And then you'll restart at the beginning of summer semester, which is May 2nd, and the end of summer semester is August 21. So that's when you would be in field during those weeks of the spring and summer semester, and then as well as a break between the 2 semesters that you'll be out of placement. In some cases, with my permission, I have allowed some students to start a 1 week early if a site has, let's say, for example, they have certain orientation at the beginning of the, like at the end of the month or something, and they want you to start in end of December instead. If I know that, I can certainly give you permission for that. We just want to make sure we know where our students are. So if you're starting something early, we want to know that we're accessible to you because, for example, here, I mean, that would be the end of December. There's, a little bit of a break, or there's a break between the fall and the spring semester. So that would be a break time. So if you're going to start during a break, I certainly wouldn't want to know about that, and have you permission to do that. At the end of the 2-semester experience, so not before, the end of the 2-semester experience, you can also end up to 2 weeks early with permission as well. So if you're at 400 hours on week, let's say 14 or before week 14 in the summer semester, and you're like, you know what, I would love to just be done a little earlier, but not like way early, because I won't let you end any earlier than that. You can ask permission to be done 2 weeks earlier. Okay, so that would be at the end of the summer semester that you could request to be done 2 weeks earlier than the 21st of August. I also have students, certainly, if you have children or families, or, there might be a time in your employment that they take a break and you would just like to have the whole time off. You are also permitted to do that as well, as long as we all are in agreement that that's the time that that the agency has allowed you to take, and that we're also aware of it. So for example, like if you have children and they have a spring break, and that spring break is in March, for example, you might want to take that break with them. So as long as it's not more than 7 calendar days or 5 business days, you can certainly take another break along the way, with just our permission and our knowledge. So as long as your field liaison, your faculty field liaison, and your agency supervisors are on board with that, we certainly would approve that. Okay. So now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Tavera. So Tavera, I've keep referring to this Tavera program. I'm going to show you it now, and some things and features about it that will help you to kind of navigate through. So I'm going to just stop this for a second. Pull up that program. Oh, okay. I guess I have to stop.